Welcome to the Fiscal Physical Podcast. Join us each week as we sit down with the founder of Alchemy Wealth Management and author of Your Fiscal Physical, Ryan Nelson. Tune in to gain valuable insights and practical tips as we simplify complex financial concepts into digestible lessons. From budgeting to retirement planning, this podcast is your go-to resource for mastering financial literacy.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of the Fiscal Physical Podcast. My name is Aaron Hoisington. I am here with my good buddy, Ryan Nelson. Ryan, what's happening with you today, my man?
Not too much new on my end. What's happening with you?
Same stuff. You know, new day we're working with here and a new episode of the Fiscal Physical. So hopefully you guys are getting your weekly dose of this. Appreciate all the listeners checking us out Tuesday mornings. Get those things downloaded. We're excited to hear what you guys' thoughts are on the last. At this point we're almost 70 episodes deep, so that's pretty wild to think about. So
that is,
it's like it's funny how time kind of gets away from you. But hopefully you guys have 20 minutes to spare to come check us out every week. We really appreciate it. And this week's topic I think is pretty relatable. Most people will be able to at least have an idea on this or have come across this conundrum, if you will, of cash versus credit. So I'll break that down a little bit because I wouldn't say it's an age-old debate, but maybe it is. Like maybe, I don't know how old it is or whatever, but I think it's appropriate to bring up about, kind of discuss the different times when it might be best to use cash, best to use credit. And I really want to plug that we are not trying to give financial advice with this here. That's not what we're trying to do, but we're just trying to think of, prompt people to think about and consider their options when they come across this situation. So, Ryan, I'm going to go ahead and let you take it away on the cash versus credit debate.
Sure. Yeah. What's your gut tell you? When maybe use cash versus when use credit?
It's funny. I was thinking about this too. Growing up, like my parents kind of instilled in me to just use cash. If I had cash, like to use that. My dad still carries hundreds of dollars in his wallet just because he likes to use cash.
Sure. Yeah.
I tend to nowadays use credit more than anything, I would say.
You're a disappointment to your father.
I am, in more ways than one. But I would say, I think he's still proud of me. But I would say that, just the thought process on what was kind of ingrained on, hey, use cash or continue to have cash, don't get credit cards, these kind of things. And I think that's really shifted once you kind of figure out exactly where they can be used in the different scenarios. But I would say I'd lean more towards cash, I suppose. But okay. I'd be curious what you would say.
Yeah, I mean, I think like most things, right? It's not that cash is better than credit or credit is better than cash. Again, they have different pros and different cons. I really don't think one is better than the other. I do see people run into some issues. But so one of the things I would say, right off the bat, is like carrying cash versus carrying a credit card and stuff. Right. There's some interesting just differences in convenience. So if you lose your wallet with $500 cash in it, you're probably
gone.
Yeah. You lose your wallet with a credit card in it, you can call your credit card company and cancel it.
Yep.
That's interesting.
Definitely.
If there's, so there's just some interesting differences, like even just there from just like a carrying standpoint and security. If you pay for a service with cash and the service or product doesn't get delivered or isn't delivered to the suitably, you're kind of out of luck, right? Yeah. If you have a credit card, you can do a chargeback and you can file it as fraud if it truly is fraud, and then the credit card company will take it upon themselves to basically claw the money back from that vendor, so there's some interesting benefits of credit, right? That said, there's also people who end up racking up thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of, let's say, credit card debt, who buying things they can't afford. And then they have this compounding issue of 20-30% interest rate on top of that, and they can barely make the interest payments, and they're in this spiral that they just can't claw themselves out of because of the high interest rates, right? So I think clearly you can see there's some good and some bad as far as utilizing credit goes. My first thoughts when I hear a question like this would be, probably my maybe the first and most important thought would be, let's say we're going to go buy a car, right? And let's say you have $30,000 you've saved for this car. So then you could take that $30,000 and buy the car outright, or you could still finance it, right? And I would say what's interesting is as you're making that decision, you would want to be comparing your interest rate. And so if the interest rate you're going to get is a promotional rate of 0.9% or something,
right,
you might say, gosh, this company will let me borrow this money at 0.9%.
Yeah.
I could just, go buy a CD with this money at a very low rate that's, almost guaranteed. And
certificate of deposit, right?
Yep.
Not like an actual compact disc.
Yeah.
I don't think that'd be.
That's not a good return.
No.
But yeah, so so if they're offering you a 0.9%, that might change your mind, and you might say, well, heck, I have the 30 grand. But maybe I'll just finance it anyways, but keep the 30 grand, go put it into certificate of deposit, get, who knows, 4% at that time, 5%, who knows. And then at the end of the day, you can now pay back that 0.9% and you still netted 4% more. So now you have your car and a little bit extra cash, right? If they come back to you and they say, hey, the interest rate is going to be 8%, you might say, gosh, it would be nice just to avoid 8%. Why don't I just pay for this car outright in cash, right?
Right.
So comparing that interest rate would be interesting, and then comparing it to what your expected returns in the quote unquote market is, whatever that is. If you're getting, a 3 or 5 year loan for a vehicle, you may not have the same risk tolerance. So you may not want to invest it as aggressively and therefore plan for as high of returns in the market. So if you're buying, say, if you're buying a vehicle with a 3 year loan, you might only be comfortable putting that money into a CD, and so your expected returns might be lower. If you're buying a home with a 30-year mortgage, the time horizon's longer, may increase your risk tolerance, and you may be able to assume higher expected returns. And so as you're comparing against the interest rate, you may make a different decision versus buying a home versus buying a car. But what I find, and what the dangerous thing is if you go to buy a car, so maybe that example I gave where you have $30,000 cash and you want to buy a $30,000 car, that's like the ideal world.
Sure.
A lot of people don't live in that ideal world. And so maybe they have $10,000, but they want to go buy a car, and they're looking and trying to determine what car to buy. And so they are looking and they say, okay, here's a used car off of, Craigslist for 10 grand. That's one option. Or I go to the dealership, here's a nicer car. It's a used car. It's 20 grand. Or I'm at the dealership, I'm like, this is an even nicer car. It's a brand new car. It's 50 grand. And you're trying to decide which one to buy. And so then you're talking to the car salesman, and they're like, well, if you buy this $50,000 car, you put 10 grand down, your payments are going to be, we finance it over 8 years. Your payments are going to be whatever, $600 a month.
Sure.
And you say, oh, I can afford $600. Okay. You don't even know what the interest rate is, maybe. Right.
Yeah.
And what I would argue is you just bought a car you can't afford. You could afford a $10,000 car. You just bought a $50,000 car, right?
Overall.
You bought a car you can't afford, and you're using credit to do so. And so I love God, what is that saying? I don't even know. I've probably used it in one of the previous podcasts, but it's about you can either use credit to use interest to your advantage, or have interest used against you.
Oh, yeah,
right?
like uses you, or yeah.
So if you go buy, like in my first example, if you had $30,000 cash and you buy a $30,000 car and they're giving it to you at 0.9% and you go reinvest it at 4%, you're taking advantage of interest.
Sure.
You're leaving that situation when it's all said and done with a car and extra money that you generated in interest. The bank let you have it at 0.9%. If instead you're doing the reverse of this, you have 10 grand, you buy a $50,000 car, and so you had to finance that $40,000 gap, you're now paying interest. So the question is always, are you receiving interest or are you paying interest, right? And so again, this can apply to a house too. If your mortgage rate on your house is 2.9% and you think you could get long-term returns in the market of 7%, you're using, by taking the credit, so by using a mortgage and investing the difference, you're receiving a net positive interest rate, right? Whereas the flip side of that is if you have a credit card that's 30 grand and it's a 20-something% interest rate, and you say, oh no, that's great because I'm investing the money. Well, if you're investing it at 7% and you're owing 20, you're at net negative 13, you're on average paying interest, right? So I think it really comes down to, are you receiving interest or are you paying interest? We typically want to avoid paying interest. I typically like receiving interest,
definitely.
Right? So that'd be one thing to consider. Another thing to consider would be, is the asset you're buying an appreciating asset or a depreciating asset?
Ooh, big piece.
So
right there.
if you buy a house or a business, that could be an appreciating asset. If you're buying a car or a boat, That would be a depreciating asset, right? I'd be pretty hesitant or a little more scared to finance a depreciating asset because it's heading to zero, right? Its value is going to zero. And if you still owe something on it, you would be what's called upside down in that you would owe more than the product is, or than the, it's a lot of people go upside down in their cars. They buy a car, drive it off the lot. They now owe more for that car than they could sell it for. So they're kind of trapped in the car. If the car gets totaled, they could be in a bad spot because they can't sell the car for as much as it's worth. So that'd be another thing to consider. Are you buying an appreciating or depreciating asset? Again, comparing the interest rates. And again, I think I'd always come back to making sure you're buying something you can afford and don't get like sold or tricked into thinking you can afford something you can't. So again, if you have 10 grand and you're buying a $50,000 car, just because you're looking at the payments could feel reasonable. Again, that doesn't mean you can really afford that. What I would argue is the more financially responsible decision would be, buy the 10,000. If they tell you, hey, the payments for this car are going to be $600 a month, you could go buy that car, or you could say, well, let me just buy this $10,000 car that I can actually afford now. But you just told me you could afford $600 a month.
Yeah.
So why don't you start saving $600 a month? And at the end of year one, you'll have $7,200 saved up, plus maybe some returns. You do that for 3 or 5 years. All of a sudden, you got $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 saved, and you could actually go and buy that car.
Sure.
So if you think you can afford a $600 payment, again, why don't you buy the car you can afford today, start saving $600 a month, 3, 4, 5 years later, you actually will be able to go afford that that $50,000 car. But what you just did is that whole time while you were saving, that $600 a month you're saving, you're investing that or putting it in a CD or using bank interest. And so again, you're gaining interest on this money as opposed to getting a loan early and paying interest, right? Yep. So just by being a little patient and like saving ahead of time, again, you can use interest to your benefit as opposed to having to pay that interest.
I think that's a phenomenal example. And I also, we were talking about this off air a little bit ago about like the spreadsheet answer and the real life answer, because sometimes you get into those dealerships. I've been there myself. And
absolutely.
They're like, hey, you can afford, the $500 a month payment or whatever.
Yeah.
You're like, you know what, I could afford a $500 payment, and you're looking and they're like, okay, cool. It's a 6%, 7% interest rate. And
sure.
You're just like, that just kind of gloss over that kind of thing. Cause you're like $500 a month. I could drive off the lot with this new car. And then you're like, is that the most financially responsible thing to do? Probably not, but
sure.
Darn it, do I want that new car kind of thing too? So like,
absolutely, we're all human. Right?
I think in the end, like you're just like the idea, and I think it's a common pitfall that people have of like you start doing the math, and you're like, well, yeah, if I just save the $600, and then you're like, oh, well, I got $600 extra a month. I might spend it here. I might do it here. I might spend this, and suddenly you're just like, well, did I come out ahead at all here? But
sure. I
think that there's the opportunity there to really, sit back and live within your means. And we're going to cover certain ones on different future podcast episode as well, too, of like lifestyle creep and these certain things of getting in there and how to best manage that. But I think that a car is a very, very, common example where you see this for sure, because you go in there, you're like $600 a month. I could do that for 6 years. You're paying this at what rate? Like in that $50,000 car, you might be paying $70,000 on it. Like
absolutely
overall, so.
Easy.
But anyway, cash versus credit. Once again, with a lot of things, depends.
One other quick question for you. So kind of in the same vein, but a slightly different take since there's so many different applications. Like, what? Just curious what your initial thoughts would be around, using credit card day to day. Like you mentioned,
sure.
Your dad carried around the $500 or X number of dollars of cash. You more carry a credit card. It sounds like. What's kind of your rationale, or why? What do you think is better?
And this is for me, and I sometimes I find things that I'm like, oh yeah, if this is used right, it's like a hack. Like I think that I'm like, if I think of the 401k or an HSA.
Sure.
When we've covered those on a Roth IRA. Roth IRA or an HSA account. We've done episodes on that. Please go check them out. I'm like looking at this. I'm just like, holy smokes! If this is used correctly, like this could. I'm going to get all these returns like tax free. That can't be right, kind of thing. Like,
sure.
And it is like, and I think that the same thing goes with like credit cards. I look at that because you can sign up for your credit cards that give you X amount of miles for every purchase that you do. And so like I tend to use my credit cards more day to day. However, I'm very cognizant and very aware that I try to pay them off every month because then I get the benefits of the rewards of the cash back that comes with it. And I feel like I'm using that credit to the best of my ability. Sometimes it doesn't work, then they get away from me though. So
sure.
I would say that that's kind of my rationale of like it's just more convenient to have their credit cards, and if I stay on top of it, I feel like it just ends up working out better. I'm taking advantage of things that I could.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think exactly. Yeah, I figured that's where you'd go with the credit card rewards. Yeah, so I think what's interesting about that, obviously the credit card companies aren't losing money.
No.
They're incentivizing you to use these credit cards for a reason, because on average, people are going to have a balance and be paying them interest, right? So that's how they can afford to give everybody rewards, right? And so what I would say is I'm the same way. I use a credit card for almost every transaction I do, but I pay it off every single month. I've never paid a single penny in interest to any credit card company.
Good for you.
Yeah, thank you. But so I would say that, for somebody like myself, I've never had, again, paid a penny of interest to any credit card company. It's clearly a tool that with my lifestyle and personality, I'm able to use without like abusing. Also, I think it's important just to sort of take sort of index of your personality. And if you're one of the people who runs up a credit card, and sees it as like a tool to buy something you can't afford, then, and all of a sudden you start paying this 20-25% interest back to the credit card company, it can be a very dangerous and slippery slope. So it can be a very dangerous tool to use, right? And so I do think credit cards, they have some great advantages. Credit card rewards are pretty cool. If you're not paying them any amount in interest and you're just taking advantage of rewards, heck, that's pretty awesome, right?
Yeah.
The fact that, if we mentioned earlier, if there's a fraudulent charge, you can call them and they basically take on the onus of reversing it and stuff for you. That's a pretty sweet benefit. I like that. If I lose it, the ability to just cancel it and request a new one, that's pretty convenient, right? So there's lots of conveniences. But again, the slippery slope is understand, on average, these credit card companies are making money. So if you ever find yourself in that position where, you're paying more in interest than you're getting in rewards, you need to kind of reevaluate and say, okay, this isn't working for me. I need to change something, and maybe moving to cash or being more cognizant would be a tool you could use to, again, come out sort of net ahead at the end.
Excellent. Love the breakdown, Ryan, as always. Hopefully that gives some food for thought for our listeners to kind of, just examine like how you're using cash versus credit and what works best for you. And obviously no judgment on our end here as far as that goes. And everybody has their own reasons, but just being a little bit more financially and fiscally aware of why and how you might be doing these things is always a good thing, I would say. But anyway, hang tight with us here. We'll be right back with the little personal section for you.
And now, to put the personal in personal finance.
Welcome back, everybody, this side of the Fiscal Physical podcast. I have a question for my friend Ryan here. We've kind of covered a similar one in the past about like people you'd want to have dinner with over the history of time or whatever. So, but this one, Ryan, is first off, you host some great parties. The things that I look forward to, like yearly. I'm like, I try to at least once a quarter. Hopefully, we're doing something something that you're hosting. I think it's awesome. But who is a celebrity or a famous person that you'd want to attend either your birthday party or one of your parties just in general?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not a big like starstruck guy. I don't know. We mentioned on a couple episodes ago that I don't listen to that much music and stuff, and I don't watch that many TV shows. So I'm not like up to date on the actors or musicians. I think if I remember right, the question before was something about like who I would want like at a dinner or something.
Yeah, like 3 people from history, like who you'd want like at dinner or something like that.
And so I mean, I don't even know how famous this person is. There's probably nobody that's listening even knows who this person is, but I mentioned on that episode, but Peter Attia, I think he's the longevity doctor. I just think he'd be.
Oh yeah.
I in a lot of ways, I think he's very similar to me in a lot of ways. He was an engineer. He was in finance. Then he went into being a doctor. But like we've had similar sports interests in the past and stuff. And just when I listen to him, just a lot of similarities. And I think that could be fun. The reality is though, I'd probably rather just have like my friends attend my party
Sure,
than a celebrity.
Yeah.
I like would actually, I would have more fun with just like my friends probably than any celebrity. So
Yeah.
What about you?
No, that's a great answer, and honestly, I'm thinking about changing my answer because I'd probably
As
have
you
more in
should.
common with my friends than a celebrity. But I do think it'd be kind of interesting to think about the overall people and like pick their brains in certain things.
Absolutely.
And I keep going back to. I'm like, do I do a sports figure? Do I do a story? And I think I'd probably want like a president there, like a previous president, whether it be George W. Bush, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, Trump. I really don't care. I think it'd be really interesting to have like a president come to your birthday party or your dinner party and just kind of talk to them and see what they're like on a personal level of, I think about, shotgunning a beer with, George W. Like that'd be kind of fun.
Plus you're getting kind of 2 for the price of 1 because then some Secret Service is going to be there.
Exactly. You're like, hey, this party's going to be well protected. Kind of thing. So I think I'd have to choose a president. I honestly, any of the living ones, I think the most recent living one is Bill Clinton. Like I think he's the only one like left who's I don't know if
or what do you mean the most recent?
Or sorry, the oldest living president I think is or like the last.
Yeah, I think so.
I think he was the last person to serve. I think was Bill Clinton. But honestly, just to kind of see like you see these people on TV give speeches how they're wired, and just see like what that would be like in person. Like would it be just a business dinner kind of thing, or would they be able to let loose and like you see interactions at different honestly at funerals when people go to funeral and like people interacting with each other and like joking around, and I'm like, oh, you don't really get to see that side of people very often to that kind of level. So I'd choose a president. I don't know which one, honestly. If any of them came, I'd be pretty excited about it. But
heck yeah, that'd be fun.
That'd be an interesting. Plus, I'd probably get more of my friends to show up if I had a president at my party too. Yeah. So that'd be kind of fun. So although they all have to be vetted, so maybe I wouldn't get many actually.
Yeah.
But anyway, thank you everybody for listening, tuning in, putting up with us. We really appreciate it here, and I'll leave it up to you, Ryan, to give it the final words.
As always, stay the course.
Thank you for joining us for the Fiscal Physical Podcast. Until next time, happy listening. And as always, stay the course. If you have a question or topic suggestions, please email us at podcast@alchemywealth.com. If you enjoyed today's discussion, subscribe to the podcast to ensure you never miss an episode. And consider leaving us a rating and review on your favorite platform. This helps other listeners like you find the show. For more resources, you can visit Alchemy Wealth Management's website at www.alchemywealth.com or find your Fiscal Physical, the book, on Amazon. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention that personal finance is just that, personal. Please don't take anything we say as advice. The preceding content is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It's not an offer or a solicitation, nor should it be construed or relied upon for tax, legal, or investment advice. It doesn't consider your personal financial situation or objectives and may not be suitable for you.